How often can you safely repeat an aggressive cut for rapid fat loss? Can consuming more protein than the recommended amount really benefit you? What's the best strategy for postmenopausal women struggling with fat loss? Is it truly possible to build muscle in a calorie deficit? Today, I'm again conspiring with Jeff Hoehn of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast for a special co-hosted Q&A where we tackled these burning questions and more, leaving nothing on the table. Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this twice-a-week podcast is dedicated to helping you achieve physical self-mastery by getting stronger, optimizing your nutrition, and upgrading your body composition. We'll uncover science-backed strategies for movement, metabolism, muscle, and mindset with a skeptical eye on the fitness industry so you can look and feel your absolute best. Let's dive right in.
Hey guys, welcome back to our second Q&A co-hosted episode. So we have the Mind Muscle Connection and the Wits and Weights podcast. Philip Pape is the host of the Wits and Weights podcast, and myself, Jeff Hoehn, the host of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. So yeah, this is the second one we did, and the first one did great. So we wanted to hop back on here and get some Q&As going. So excited to have you guys for this episode. If you are familiar with Philip, he is the host of the Wits and Weights podcast. He has a wide range of coaches on, and a few that, if you listen to the Mind Muscle Connection that you're familiar with: Brandon DeCruz, Brian Borstein, Jordan Lips, among others. And then obviously I'm seeing guests that Philip has on and having them on mine as well too. He has multiple episodes per week going over all things nutrition, lifting, muscle, metabolism, and fat loss. So make sure you give his podcast a follow or subscribe. And again, I think Philip does a great job of breaking things down, makes it very applicable for the everyday person, which I think is great. And not enough people do that. And sounds great. Everything looks awesome as well too. So Philip, looking forward to doing this with you again, man.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm really excited, man. I mean, last time, we covered a lot of fun topics, and I think we're going to do the same thing today. You mentioned the practical side of things. There's so much noise out there. There's also a lot of people that love to get into the science, and we do that, but there's a certain limit to where, you got to stop geeking out and start telling you what this means for me. And you probably see this with clients. Sometimes they could overthink it, right? It's like, well, should it be 0.75 grams per pound of protein, right? And we try to distill it and make it simple. So for those of you listening to me now on Wits and Weights, Jeff, he's the man. I love his show. I follow it myself. The Mind Muscle Connection. Definitely follow it. If not, you are missing out. He's a coach. He has got a ton of personal experience. He's not afraid to question the conventional wisdom, like I was talking about, to find what works. He's got solo episodes, got guest interviews, a lot of great names out there. And so after you're done with this episode, head over to Mind Muscle Connection, wherever you listen to your podcast, give it a follow. And I think we're ready to get into it, man.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the last one I think it was right around an hour. I think we tackled them all in a pretty good amount of time. But yeah, the last one was super fun. So that's why I was like, hey, let's freaking do this again. And I think a lot of people found it super useful. I know, I think you got good feedback from your audience. I got great feedback from my audience. And, everyone was kind of able to check out your podcast, hopefully, and everything like that. So yeah, let's freaking get into it. Usually when I do these with like Brandon and Jeremiah, you start asking Brandon questions, and the next thing you know, it's we're like 45 minutes in, we haven't even answered a question. So
yeah, the banter, right? Yeah.
The banter. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I'm sure some stuff will come up about us potentially here with this. So cool. First question is, what are your thoughts on rapid fat loss, and how can you repeat a very aggressive cut? Related to this, what do you think of protein-sparing modified fasting in a 5-2 diet fashion for the general population trying to lose weight?
Yeah, so there's like three questions there. I think one is my thoughts on rapid fat loss. Another is how often can you do it? And then protein sparing modified fast, specifically as a 5-2, which is a little bit different than the original one. So speaking of like learning about what's going on with ourselves, right? I don't know if you were aware of this, but last year I did a rapid fat loss protocol myself, and I recruited a bunch of people from my community to experiment with me, a bunch of crazies who are like, yeah, that sounds easy. And we did something inspired by Dr. Bill Campbell, who's a well-known researcher, obviously, with aggressive dieting down at University of South Florida. And it's pretty simple. It's 4 days in a very aggressive deficit, something like 45% below maintenance. And then a 1 day refeed where you bring the carbs back up to maintenance. And then you repeat it once or twice. So if you do it twice, it ends up being about 2 weeks. And for a guy like me at 180, 190, I might lose like 4 pounds of fat doing it that way. The idea being that you keep the protein really high, at least 1 gram per pound, if not 1.2 or even a little bit higher. You keep training hard and you're good to go. My thoughts on it are, like any dieting approach, the more aggressive you go, the shorter the duration, right? Otherwise, you risk losing muscle. Also, I would put a bunch of caveats on this one because people are like, I'll have somebody reach me and say, I've got 20 pounds of weight to lose. I've never done any of this stuff. should I do your rapid fat loss program? I'm like, no. Let's not do that. Let's get everything dialed in like you would before a fat loss phase anyway, but even more dialed in terms of your training, your tracking, your protein, like keeping the stress down, all that good stuff in a good place, quiet time of the year, and then go after it really hard and be consistent with that protein and make it happen. And then, yeah, you can lop off a couple pounds. If you have a lot of weight to lose, it's probably not the best approach from an adherence perspective anyway, because it's short. And now you're like, well, what do I do after that? Do I just taper it down to a less aggressive cut? Yeah, maybe, but now you've already experienced like all this adaptation and psychological pressure early on. You're not going to feel great. Or do you just punctuate building phases with this? Or if you've already lost a bunch of weight and you're fairly lean, you use this occasionally. That's my thought on doing it in general. And then as far as repeating it, I wouldn't do it until you've come back to maintenance and fully recovered and then do it again. But again, you shouldn't be doing them back to back. The 5-2 protein sparing modified fast, from what I understand, and you may have a different kind of history on this, Jeff, is the original diet was eat whatever you want for 5 days and then have 600 calories of protein for 2 days. And it's just another form of fasting. It's just another form of restriction that technically doesn't require you to track, but at the end of the day, you could easily not lose weight if you're just overeating on those 5 days, right? Like any other fast. It sounds miserable to me, but I get why you would want to do it, especially if you combine it with tracking and now you're at maintenance for those 5 days and then you go into the fast for 2 days. I know Brandon is doing something like that. So for the general population trying to lose weight, which was the question, I would say do what works for you and try traditional tracking and traditional, even if you want to cycle the calories, that's fine, but don't try to do anything too extreme because that could be what got you in trouble in the first place. I don't know. And I'll let you fill in the gaps because I know there's a lot of nuance to this one.
Yeah. I mean, this was something that I had seen the 5-2 diet there with that. And after talking to Brandon, I do think that there is some potential benefits of it. I was kind of thinking from a lean body mass perspective, I could see how this could be beneficial because if you're doing those 5 days, which ideally, I'm assuming we would ideally want you to be at probably close to maintenance, right? Like you said, you don't want to obviously overdo it, but the issue becomes are you tracking during that? And if you don't track, then do you end up kind of getting into a large surplus, right? But, if you're tracking and you're closer to your estimated maintenance during that period of time, I really think that it could be great from a lean body mass perspective, just because you are going to be having so much time where you're giving your body plenty of energy, right? And then on those days that you're not, you're getting enough protein in. And like you said, it's important that you lift weights in that process. So I could see how that could be beneficial from a lean body mass perspective. But I think you hit on this on both of these. It kind of comes down to me, the challenge is the mental side of things, right? Is that something that you can stick to? And like you said, does it just lead you to this kind of yo-yo approach, right? That would be something that I want to look out for. Look out for the hunger on those really lower days. See how you respond to that. Because some people, they can do those really low days and they're good to go. But some people do those low days and they're just ravenously hungry. And then like you said, it just leads to them over consuming, right? So I would really say that would be one that I would, if I was working with a client, this would have to be someone that's they've dieted in the past and I know that they don't that's not going to be a potential issue there. Because I do think that having those lower calorie days, if you're a busy person, having those lower calorie days a couple days a week could be super helpful as well too, from that standpoint. That's just if you had a day, Philip, where you just do a bunch of podcasts or client check-ins and stuff, man, it would be nice to not have to worry about eating sometimes, right? And you could line it up with those days. But again, you run into those potential issues there with that. So like you said, I think it is really individual. And I would probably lean towards from a general pop standpoint, probably not doing that, at least for your first couple fat loss phases. And then, kind of seeing how you respond to maybe some lower calorie days and then potentially bring that in there with that. So that's kind of my thought on the 5-2. What I would say on the rapid fat loss, this was something that, before I kind of talked to Bill Campbell about this, I was kind of wondering, what can you actually expect from a fat loss perspective in a short time frame, right? I was kind of questioning, can you really expect anything from it? And so from his studies, from what I took from it is, you can actually, lose a decent amount in a few days, but obviously you have to be super rigid with it, right? You have to really stay on top of the deficit. And it just runs back to the same issues that we just talked about from the 5-2 perspective. Are you prone to potentially overeating there with that? And then, like you said, again, the more weight you lose, the less you can do that, right? The duration needs to be a lot shorter. And obviously I think what you can run into is that could kind of be addicting of seeing it go down super quick and then being oh, I'm just going to keep doing this, right? And so that would be my biggest concern. And like you said, obviously, once you really start to push that, are you losing some lean body mass in that process? But I do think that it can be motivating to see kind of those quick results. I haven't read it yet, but there's a new study on reps, and they were talking about what are some patterns that are going to show that somebody's going to lose weight and like actually stick with it. And one of it was like, one of them, the big ones was like kind of seeing that weight loss right off the bat there with it, right?
Yeah.
It can be motivating to see that. So that would be kind of a pro there of taking a quicker approach. But like you said, again, if you have a lot of weight to lose, that's probably not the way that you want to go there. But I am a huge fan of something that I've become a bigger fan of is having these approaches where it does have some built-in either extended diet breaks or days where you are a little bit higher at maintenance. Because I do think from a lean body mass perspective, it can be helpful, but also a mental and flexibility side of things, I think they can also be helpful. So kind of my thoughts there on that. I don't know if there's anything I left out or anything like that.
No, I mean, you hit on there's always trade-offs between physiology and psychology, right? And psychology is the big one people underestimate because they see these beautiful plans written out on paper. And, even we experience it. You're going to a new phase and you're like, here's my plan. It's like, it's going to happen exactly like that. And it never does. And you have to be prepared for that. I do love, like, for a more advanced person, like you said, Brandon, with the 5'2", if you kind of know how your body responds and what you can tolerate and also what your level of discipline and adherence is going to be, it's great. Also, if you're coaching somebody, sometimes I almost don't call that person Gen Pop because they have this extra direct support to kind of adapt to it. And then, kind of when you're off on your own, Gen Pop is where that comes in. But it's good stuff, man.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you bring up. Like having a coach help you with it, like having that like kind of extra set of eyes, man, can really be super helpful. And that's a good point you bring up, right? Like I would definitely feel more comfortable with that. I guess the last thing on this would be like either one of these that you do, like make sure you have some sort of game plan or plan afterwards. And again, this is where having a coach can be super helpful because I think that's where you can really run into issues. I think, again, people can do these kind of short bursts of fat loss, but it really comes down to what does that kind of period of time afterwards look like there with that. So,
yeah, man. So, yeah, I think we answered the question there. We'll go on to the next one if that's good with you.
Yeah.
And that is for you, my man. It's, do you think consuming more protein than what is recommended has any benefits?
So I'm assuming with this question, he means kind of that 1 gram-ish per pound of body weight kind of like benefit there, right?
That's my guess beyond the normal, like our evidence-based recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually really like this question. I had like a lot of thoughts that come. So I'm going to go with some pros of it. And then I want to kind of go over some potential downsides of potentially going over that amount. So I think from a muscle building standpoint, right? So we're talking building muscle. I think once you get to that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, maybe 1.2, I think if you go over that, you're not going to see any more return on your investment from a muscle building standpoint, right? And again, this is under the assumption that you're training hard and pushing your training, right? Because that's obviously the thing that's going to send that signal, and then protein kind of completes that process, right? So I think from a muscle building standpoint, I don't think that you're going to get any more benefit from going too far over 1.2. Again, if you're really trying to maximize and trying to build as much muscle as possible, maybe you might want to be on the safer side and you could potentially go a little bit higher. But from my understanding of the research, you're going to kind of max this out at 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight there. However, I do think there's some other benefits of potentially going higher than this 1 gram per pound of body weight. And again, that's the number we'll kind of go for here. And I think the first one is satiety. Protein in general is more satiating than other sources of, again, carbohydrates and fats. But I do think within that, it does depend on your protein source, right? If you're eating 150 grams of protein through like protein powder, well, I do think that's going to bump that down a little bit, right? So I think your food selection for protein is super important. But generally speaking, protein is going to be more satiating than carbohydrates or fats, right? So I think that's the big one there. So if you're in a fat loss phase, maybe you go over that 1 gram, 1.2 grams per pound of body weight to get a little bit more satiety out of it. The second benefit would be higher thermic effective food. So protein uses the most energy to absorb and digest, again, generally speaking here. So you could get a small benefit there from that. I think Jose Antonio had a bunch of studies where they did these like massive amounts of like protein. Like we're talking like 3 grams. I don't know the exact numbers, but it would be more than most people could actually do. And, they found it actually did help with like, it was harder for them to gain body fat, right? Because they had these higher protein amounts. But again, we're talking super high levels. I would not recommend that to anyone. There with that. So again, a higher thermic effective food, you could burn a little bit more calories, but it's just going to be a small amount. Again, to be on the safe side from a muscle building standpoint, like again, if you really want to maximize it, you're a little worried about it, maybe you go a little bit higher than that. Again, the research kind of shows that it does max out around that 1 gram. And then 4, to me, you like it. Like if you really like protein and you enjoy those types of foods, by all means, you can go higher than this number. But with all these pros, there is some downsides, I think, to going over 1 gram per pound of body weight. So the first is, carbs, fat, and protein make up calories. So at some point, there has to be this give and take. If you're eating such high protein, this could take away from carbs and fats, right? Your carbs could get super low. Now it's going to impact your training. It's going to impact your recovery, right? Fat, same thing. Those get too low. Fats are important from like a hormone standpoint, and we need, a certain amount of essential fatty acids. So again, that can lower those things if you're eating too high protein. I think too, protein can, for some people, be harder to digest. You may, when you get to these super high levels of protein, you may find that it kind of sits in your stomach. It's just a little bit harder to digest, right? So again, that would be a potential downside. And then lastly, I think once you get over 1 gram, 1.2, it's just tough to do. And your diet's probably going to be a little less tasty overall, right? Because that means less carbs and fats. But again, that could potentially be a good thing here on that. So I think to kind of wrap this up, I think if you're in a fat loss phase, maybe you go a little above 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you're in a building phase and you like protein, you find that you really don't want to gain, you want to limit fat gain, maybe you go a little bit higher protein, right? But again, from a muscle building standpoint, I think things get kind of maxed out around that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Again, if you want to be on the safer side, maybe go a little bit higher than that.
Yeah, man, mic drop. You answered everything about that question. No, I don't want to make it too long because you covered like most of the points that I was going to mention if they didn't come up. As far as the curve of when protein intake kind of maxes out, we know that there's a point of diminishing returns. And like you said, 0.8, even 0.7. I mean, the more they look at this, the more it kind of angles down a little bit toward that 0.7 where, there's almost no benefit to going above that from a practical standpoint. So to the person asking the question, my question back to them is, why are you asking the question? Is it because you have a high protein diet that's much higher? In which case, I've had plenty of clients like that. You see they're bigger guys consuming well north of 3,000 calories. And they're like, I love my meat, or I used to do carnivore or something like that. And it all works fine because they have plenty of calories to work with. Fats and carbs aren't really being sacrificed. What's the difference between 350 and 450 grams of carbs, right? So in that case, just keep eating the way you're eating if you enjoy it and it works for you. And that's the second piece of this is it working for you? And do you want to experiment? Because if you're wondering, if you're currently at the 0.8 and you're like, what would happen to me if I'm at 1.2, 1.3, especially during fat loss? That's where I see some benefit with some of this stuff. Like you said, satiety, body composition, another Bill Campbell research, I think. Oh no, he reviewed it about the impact of protein on body composition, even beyond what we already thought. Just do it before and after and see how it works. Other than that, everything Jeff just said makes sense. There's no benefit intentionally of increasing your protein beyond the normal 0.7 to 1 gram per pound.
I think too, like on that one thing that they kind of hit, and I know this kind of struck a chord with this resonated with a few clients, was like people like are super worried about getting enough protein. One, I think, again, you make sure your weight training's there, right? Because at the end of the day, like if that's not there, it's like protein isn't going to do anything if you're not sending that signal to build muscle. So I think that's the first thing. Second is, you going from 0.3 grams per pound of body weight to 0.6 that's going to have a massive impact on your, like the results you're going to see. But if you're going from like 0.7, 0.8 to 1 gram, the return on that investment is going to be a little bit smaller, right? So we need to think of it from that standpoint as well too. Like, where are you going from? Again, if you're at 1 gram and you're like, oh, I really want to maximize to 1.2, it's like, again, the return on that investment is going to be a lot lower than if you were like super low. And I think sometimes people, kind of overlook that, when it comes to nutrition stuff and everything. They're always like, what's the most optimal? And so keep that in mind too, there with that. Yep.
Totally agree, man. Nothing to add to that.
So with the protein, have you kind of like, I guess the one thing that kind of changed my mind on it too was this kind of recent study where it was, I think they had upwards of like 100 grams, I think after, and their NPS muscle protein synthesis was still elevated, hours after. That kind of changed my mind a little bit on timing. I don't know if that changed it for you or anything. It made me like, it's still important to me, but it made it maybe a little bit lower on the priority list. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. If anything, it's not symmetrical anymore, meaning I used to recommend kind of a minimum, but also make sure you distribute enough. Now I say like, at least try to get the minimum in one meal, but there's not really an upper limit if you want to do it twice or 3 times in a day. Otherwise, it's a matter of practicality.
Yep. Right. That again, I feel like a lot of this stuff, man, as I learn more, it comes down to what's really the practicality of it. So
yeah, for sure.
Cool. You feel good on that one?
I think we're good, man.
Awesome. So I'm a postmenopausal woman who has struggled with undereating for years due to a slow metabolism. Despite increasing my calorie intake, exercising regularly, and having a high protein diet, I'm not seeing much progress on the scale, although I'm losing inches. how can I effectively lose fat and reveal muscle definition, considering my unique circumstances and history?
This is such a loaded question. I'm sure when you saw it, you thought the same thing. And I know you recently did an episode about like, it's probably not your hormones, right? It was something like that. It's probably not your hormones. There's so much in here that I would want to first address before I even answer the question. For the person listening, or really any women listening who are thinking these thoughts, the first one is the statement that I've been struggling with under eating for years due to a slow metabolism. There's an assumption there that your metabolism's quote unquote slow, and it could just be, in an adapted state because you've been under eating. Okay, fair enough. Maybe you haven't been training, maybe you haven't been preserving muscle, whatever. We don't want to assume your metabolism's slow. It is what it is, and we'd want to do what's necessary to recover and see where the current set point is for that. But then she said, despite increasing calories, exercising regularly, and having a high protein diet. So, okay, those are good things, right? Like getting enough energy, exercising. I'm hoping she means training. We don't know for sure. And then having a high protein diet. I'm not seeing much progress on the scale, but I'm losing inches. Right there, I'd say that's a win. Like that's a huge win right there too, where, okay, why are we obsessed with the scale? What is it in your history or relationship with scale weight that causes you to think that this is a problem, right? I'm losing inches. And then she said, how can I effectively lose fat and reveal my muscle, considering my unique circumstances and history? And so again, I would say, we're all unique, but we're also not unique, right? Like, we all lose muscle mass with age if we don't train. For women, hormones tend to decline during peri-post menopause, but lifestyle changes can massively mitigate those. So I do want to acknowledge the challenges that this person and all women face. We had a similar question like this in our last Q&A. And, we're under eating for a long time. That definitely slows things down. But we don't want to attribute changes to menopause itself necessarily, or fat storage or anything like that. The fact that you're losing inches, you're training, you got protein already tells me you're doing a lot of the right things, right? So acknowledge that from a mindset perspective, that's a huge win. And you're experiencing some sort of body recomp, right? And again, Jeff's big in body recomp here. If the scale's staying the same and your inches are going down and you're getting stronger, that's all good. So, really to simplify it here is to keep progressing. It's finding the right, approach for you in terms of, if you want to have fat loss, let's find a moderate rate of loss. Let's make sure we're tracking. Let's make sure, like in the last question, you're getting at least that reasonable amount of protein, and then be patient and consistent as we work on that. And if the goal at the end of the day is to get a lower scale weight, I would want to rewind and say, what is your true reason here? What is your value-based reason for this? It's okay to have short-term motivations, physique motivations, looking good in the mirror. I deal with that every day with clients. And but that'll only take you, from here to here. How do we make this a lifestyle for a life that works for you? So yeah, the basics, Jeff, are going to be what we recommend to everybody, besides then getting blood work and things like that checked if we do think there's some sort of hormonal issue. So I'll set it up that way. I'll let you go, and then we'll back and forth on this.
Yeah, man. No, you definitely nailed that, right? I actually just did a Q&A episode from a question I had. Somebody asked about fast and slow metabolism. So I dove into that. So definitely would lead people to that episode. I think it should be out like June 10th-ish, maybe something like that. But yeah, people, like you said, we all kind of think we have a slow metabolism, but I think a lot of times it is kind of the things that we're doing that actually lead to that, right? And again, maybe yours is a little bit slower and whatnot, but again, I always like to look at like, what are you actually doing, and usually, if you look this over, it's like, okay, well, you can obviously improve this, you can improve that, right? Before saying you actually have a slow metabolism. So I agree with you there on that. And like you said, we don't want to think that this is any special circumstance or anything like that. Like all women go through menopause during that period of time, right? And then like you said, this is why we're coaches, right? Like people have these issues all the time where they aren't seeing the results that they think they should. So kind of like you said, we obviously want to respect that, like, hey, everyone is unique and has different circumstances, but these are pretty common things, right? And usually we think that it's just something with us and there with that. But I had a few things I wanted to go over. So, like again, are you tracking the right metrics? Because kind of like you said there, it's like not seeing progress on the scale, but you're losing inches. So it's like, to me, again, what's like you said with the scale, like, do we really need to just focus on that? Like if you're losing inches, especially in your midsection, it's like you said, you're seeing progress. So is it more like, are you more concerned with weight? Or are you more concerned with like the aesthetic side of things? Because that's obviously going to be, something you would want to look into. There's that. And most people, they end up not caring as much about the scale as they think, right? But I also like, within tracking the right metrics, are you tracking your weight the correct way as well too? I'm sure you see this where people say they're not dropping weight, but then you look and you're like, your average weight literally is trending down week over week. What are you talking about? But they get too caught up in like, one day it's lower and then it's a little bit higher. But again, they don't look at the trend. So, make sure you're tracking the right metrics. It's easy to think you're not going in the right direction. I also find that a lot of times in this situation, people aren't tracking as much as they could, right? It's like, well, I'm eating healthier, I'm making better choices, and the scale's not moving. But then again, they're not tracking consistently with the scale. They're not tracking, So again, make sure you're doing that. I would imagine if they asked you this question, they probably track their calories and stuff like that. But I also would want to know, what's the dieting history as well too? Like you said, you increased your caloric intake, but how long did you do that? What did you get it to? What happened during that period of time? What is your current body weight? Because I think also that goes into expectations. If you're 115 pounds, we kind of need to reframe those expectations versus if you're, 175, like that weight loss is going to look a little bit different. So what's your current body weight? What does your exercise look like? Because like you said, we hopefully you're lifting weights, but are you consistent with that? So those would be things that I would kind of check there with that. But just some other things like to potentially look out for, like Philip said, lift, protein. I think for this demographics, especially, I think making sure that you don't go too long without protein after your workout. This is a kind of demographic. I think protein timing is maybe a little bit more important. So if you exercise, do make sure you're getting protein, especially if you go in fast you're getting it relatively soon after. Sleep's going to be another big one for this age range because, menopause can sometimes lead to lower quality sleep, people waking up in the middle of the night, hot flashes, stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of things that people overlook when it comes to sleep. This isn't a sleep question, but man, we could probably dive into that as a whole topic in terms of some like low-hanging fruit sleep hygiene tips there. But again, making sure, sleep is good, right? You're prioritizing it. That's going to be a big one. That's really going to make things a lot tougher. You're doing the right thing here, but make sure you are taking some time away from fat loss dieting to fuel your body. We're not just increasing calories for the sake of increasing. The goal is to fuel your body, make sure you give it the nutrients and calories you need. And again, make sure you're doing that for a good amount of time, right? You doing it for 2 weeks and then, kind of just winging it, that's not going to be enough. Like you really do want to kind of stick to that a little bit longer. I also wonder, and I think you kind of mentioned this too, like, could you have some maybe better fat loss methods? Like, are you trying to lose super quick? Like, could you improve that aspect of it? Like making sure you get enough protein, you're losing more at a moderate rate versus feeling like you need to get off 2 pounds per week, right? With that. And then, yeah, those would be kind of the main ones that I would look at in this specific example here with that. Actually, sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to go over here on this. I wanted to go over some like potential supplements that I see that this kind of demographic misses out on. Again, we know supplements are lower on the priority list. These things here are going to be your most important, but a few that I see that are important for this demographic is vitamin D. Make sure you're at least taking a nice maintenance dosage. You can look at your blood work to see where that's at. Fish oil is another big one. I like Legion's fish oil. It has the right amount of EPA and DHA there with that. Magnesium, glycinate could be a good one, especially if you're waking up with hot flashes. Glycine can be helpful. So magnesium glycinate, and then creatine. And this is the demographic that kind of shies away from creatine because it's kind of known as like a kind of like steroids. Oh, they're going to make me super bulky. But for this demographic, I think creatine is super important, maybe more so than, say your 25-year-old male who's trying to build muscle. So just some things there for you to focus on potentially.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really the, fat loss 101 episode. Like we just need to give that to most women, regardless of the hormone state, and that'll get you most of the way there. But I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag on this. I eventually messaged back with this person, and one thing you mentioned was, is she actually potentially losing weight? It looked like she was very, very slowly trending downward in reality. And also she wasn't really tracking in an effective way that linked her intake to her metabolism. So she's doing that now. I didn't want to bias the discussion, but it's those kinds of things that are the basics. And then, yeah, I love the idea of supplements and nutrients. I'm really getting a lot more into micronutrients these days.
Yeah.
Especially for women with like thyroid issues and whatnot, just even from a food perspective of trying to hunt around and figure out which foods give you these nutrients, because you may just be neglecting an entire nutrient like selenium, right? Or what have you. The sleep and stress, I totally didn't even mention that, but like you said, that could actually be the deal breaker for a lot of women at that age with the life stress, the obligations, the kids and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's checking all the boxes and then going into a reasonable rate of loss, not overdoing it. If your metabolism is kind of lower now because you haven't built a lot of muscle mass yet, you're not going to be able to go in this huge deficit because you're going to be eating just like 800 calories. So you're going to have to be patient and kind of go down a little bit and then continue to build that muscle, which this person said she's already getting body recomp. So like, I think it's a great start.
There's two things that you said there that I want to point out. The first is the micronutrients. So with that, and this is where like being low calorie can catch up to you is, you're more likely to have holes in that, right? So this is where, again, this is why I said like time away from fat loss dieting to fuel your body. And this is exactly why, because the higher, not like you need to eat 4,000 calories and gain a ton of weight, but, the more calories you have, the more you can, kind of fill those holes there. with that. And then on the slower weight loss side of things, I know we just talked about rapid fat loss, but again, we kind of talked how that's like a certain demographic that will really work well with. With kind of my content, like I try to reframe the slower weight, especially for this demographic, the slower weight loss is almost a pro, because if anything, and this is probably going to go into our next question here, but you're kind of putting yourself in a really good position to maintain and even potentially build some muscle in this process. And again, for this demographic specifically, that's going to be super helpful for your long-term health, right? Because again, I feel like a lot of people in this demographic, they really just focus on the weight loss side of things, and that leads to them doing things that lead to lean body mass loss. And we already talked about the importance of that, and not to mention bone health and everything like that. So I think if anything, kind of reframing that for this specific example where you said she actually was trending down, even though it was slower, I would say that honestly is perfect. And that is kind of what I would be wanting to go for anyways here, because I think you're going to put yourself in the best position long-term with that. So
yeah, it's within that like cone of body recomp. Like we think of body recomp as just maintenance, and you talk about this all the time, you can recomp at different levels of surplus or deficit and even consider it over the long term. So yeah, good. Keep it up. Whoever sent in the question, like a lot of good things going for you, and let us know, one or two things that you decide to change based on this conversation.
Just understand that, hey, we know this is a challenging time too. Like it's not to just like brush that under the rug and be like, oh, it's super easy. You just got to do everything. We understand, hey, this is a challenging time, and things are a little bit different now. So you do need to work with your body. So, definitely don't want to underestimate the impact of that. So.
Yeah. We're a blend of tough love and real love going on here. Like we
Yep.
get it. We're not the 20-year-old, even though Jeff's 10 years younger than me. He's not a 20-year-old trainer. He's a guy with a lot of experience.
Hey, just work harder. Come on. I don't care if you have 3 kids and you're in menopause, just freaking work harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
7 days a week. All right.
Hi, my name is Alan, and I just want to give a shout out to Philip Pape of Wits and Weights for being a huge part of the foundation for my continued health and well-being. Philip exemplifies a nutrition coach who demonstrates how much he cares. Philip works tirelessly and with dedication to provide coaching support and major content for us to use. He creates a practical approach from research, and Philip empowers all of us to use food as quality for our health. He is skilled in how to assess and direct nutrition. Philip creates a community full of wisdom, support, and camaraderie. In summary, Philip Pape is the real deal. He knows how to assess and direct nutrition, and he continues to steer me in the right direction. Thank you, Philip.
All right. I'll ask you the next question if we're ready to move on.
Yep.
All right. So, classic question. How feasible is it to build muscle in a deficit?
This is right at my alley. I freaking love this one. So my big thing with this is I'll still get kind of like messages of like when I'll talk about this of people being like, oh, and it's typically the same kind of type of person, right? Usually somebody who has a lot of muscle and they are like a kind of bodybuilder, right? It's like, no, there's no way you can build muscle in a deficit. If anything, you're lucky to maintain anything and whatnot. And so I hear that and it's like, okay, yes, you are right. But in certain situations, right, we need to go a layer deeper than this. And it really depends on the individual context. Yes, in that specific person example, let's say you're a bodybuilder, you're super shredded, you have a lot of muscle. Yeah, for you, you're not going to be able to build muscle in the deficit. But Philip, I don't know about you, but yeah, maybe for us, it seems like that's a little bit bigger of the population. But in general, how big of the population is that, honestly? Like if you were to take the entire world, like
5%, right? Or less.
I would say even less, like out of the entire population, I would say it's 99.9% of people are not that person, right? If we take the entire population, now we get into like people who work out, okay, it starts to...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, because if you take just the percentage of people who even do anything we talk about here, you're already down to like 5%. So fair point.
So if you zoom into the people that we are probably talking to, okay, it's probably closer, like you said, 5% or so. But anyway, so
5% of 5%.
Right. I think that we need to be careful with saying that because it leads to people thinking that it's them and we need to dive in a little bit more to it, right? So again, it is very individual. So I would kind of want to go over specific scenarios here, right? And things that are going to matter here. So can you build muscle in a deficit? So this is going to depend on your current body composition, okay? If you're somebody who has a ton of muscle, really low levels of body fat, you're not going to be able to build muscle in a deficit, right? But in saying that, it also is dependent on the size of the deficit, okay? So the size of the deficit is going to matter. So people kind of think of a calorie deficit as, oh, it's just a calorie deficit. Well, there's a size to this deficit, right? The larger the deficit is, so the quicker you lose weight, the less likely this is to happen, right? You're not putting your body in a best position to build muscle. So you take somebody who's super shredded, has a lot of muscle and you put them in a large deficit, well, for them, they're going to have to really do everything to maintain their muscle. And they may even lose muscle in that process. But even that person I just talked about, they're in a smaller calorie deficit, they're still probably not going to be able to build muscle. But now you take somebody who is over, let's say for men, over 15% body fat, decent amount of muscle. Women, let's say 25% body fat, decent amount of muscle. For them, they're going to be able to build some muscle in the deficit so long as all the things we talk about are in check and that deficit is not too large. Because even within that particular person, the larger that deficit gets, the less likely this is to happen, right? So again, we need to look at like training history, but that's going to go into how much muscle you have. Other factors outside of the gym. So obviously the less these are dialed in, the worse sleep is, the higher your stress is, the worse your diet quality is, the lower the likelihood of this is going to happen in a deficit, right? So we need to look at that. Again, what your training looks like. If your training isn't super specific to building muscle, again, this is going to be tougher, right? If you're somebody who does like a ton of group classes, maybe your training is geared more towards like powerlifting style, I think you're going to have a tougher time building muscle in a deficit, right? But, somebody who's had a long layoff and coming back from an injury, like the likelihood of this happening is going to be a little bit higher in this. So that's kind of my like how feasible it is. Now, what I want to talk about here is, again, people hear this and they think, oh, okay, well, so I can build muscle in a deficit. Now, being in a deficit, no matter what, is still going to be it's going to be inferior to being at maintenance for building muscle. Okay. No way you put it, right? Even if you're this perfect person that I talked about, like you're perfect for recomp, you can build muscle in deficit. It's still, you're going to probably see a little less muscle in a deficit compared to maintenance. But even from there, you go to maintenance, right? You can still build a decent amount of muscle at maintenance. But even then, it's like if you're at a surplus, is still going to be even a little bit better for building muscle, right? So it's kind of on the step ladder here. So you really just need to decide, like, if you're someone who's going to try to maximize muscle as much as possible, well, at some point, you're probably going to have to be in a calorie surplus. I don't think you need to go into that right away, but at some point, you're going to need to be in a calorie surplus there with that. So I kind of like to look at these as levels too and understand that, again, if you're someone who can build muscle in deficit, the longer you do that, the likelihood of the amount of muscle you're going to see is going to trend down over time there. So I think I kind of hit on everything I wanted to there. I don't know if there was any follow-ups or things you wanted to add.
Yeah, no, that's a great foundation. I agree with all of that. I think the research has looked at various deficits, and I think 500 calories has been that limit of being in calorie deficit where we start to see muscle loss in most populations, regardless, even untrained. And I know they've done studies with trained lifters who have like 3, 4, 5 years of experience on short durations. These studies usually like 6 or 8 weeks long with a calorie deficit, and they still see muscle gain. So we know it can happen. And like you said, you're not the special snowflake. I shouldn't use that term. That can be triggering, but who's like super advanced trained. Like there are not that many people in that realm. There are a couple other demographics. I don't know if you mentioned them. One is if somebody who has excessive weight to lose. So I've had clients who are usually male clients who are like 260, 270 at 5'9", and they want to get down to close to that 200 mark. And their body has so much fat storage that is like putting them in a surplus while they're in a deficit.
Yep.
And so they build a ton of muscle as they're recomping, and everything's actually kind of smooth if you've got it set it up right for a lot of people, especially males that I've worked with. The other situation is if you're detrained, right? Again, I've seen that as well. Some guy that did what I didn't do when I was a teenager in my 20s and actually worked out and hit the weights because I didn't know this stuff until my late 30s. And they show me pictures of how they were jacked when they were 22, and now they're the dad bod and, overweight. And they're like, I ride my bike. That's all I do. Okay, let's get you back lifting weights. And then all of a sudden their body's like, it just like sucks up the protein and just packs that muscle back on. And there's a biological reason for that, having to do with like satellite cells and neurons and stuff having already been built or developed and grown when you were earlier. And they're always there waiting to get big again. So that population can probably hack their way to, some body recomp. And then the one thing I want to ask you about, Jeff, is you said powerlifting style. I'm assuming you mean during fat loss if you're using powerlifting style because it's not very much volume or stimulus compared to like a bodybuilding style. And I wonder if you could explain that a little bit, because my understanding is pretty much any auto-regulated form of training where you can train hard, close to failure with sufficient volume is going to give you what you need. Is the premise here that you're doing like squats once a week for 1 RMs and no back offs and no other volume, no accessory work, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Like you're just doing like the main list. You're literally just working in like the 1 to 3 rep range. Right. But and again, is that going to people will take, this is the same thing as like the maintenance, like building muscle and maintenance. It's like, okay, that doesn't mean you're not going to build any muscle, but like say you're in a deficit and like you're trying to build muscle, lose body fat at the same time, you're just going to be, it's not going to be as specific to building muscle as I would like it to be. But again, if you're okay with that trade-off, like understanding, hey, I'm probably going to leave a little bit of muscle growth on the table for this. Okay, it is what it is, right? It just comes down to trade-off. So yes, it comes down to the specificity of the training, right? That, like you said, it's just not enough. It's going to end up not being enough volume. That 1 to 3 rep range isn't necessarily the greatest for building muscle. It's, and whatnot. So that's really what it comes down to. This is kind of something that I've changed my mind on, because I've always kind of talked about like, well, you need to have your training specific to hypertrophy. And what I tell people is you probably want to have, like, if you're really trying to maximize body recomp and again, trying to build some muscle in the deficit, if you're under these situations is, I would say you want at least 50% of your training to be geared towards hypertrophy, right? So if you want to do a thing where it's like a power building style, again, is that going to be the most effective from a muscle building standpoint? No, but it's still going to be good enough to build muscle, right? So long as 50% of it's hypertrophy. You like to do group classes, again, maybe 50% of it's group classes, but I want at least 50% of that training to be geared towards, building muscle there with that.
I can attest to that. I totally agree. That's why I wanted to clarify for the listeners so they knew what you meant, because at least a lot of people I know who do the power building style, or they do West Side style or whatever, they do their main lifts and they might be auto-regulating like back offs and stuff like that. But then they're also adding all this, what do they call it in West Side? The extra accessory work. Man, I'm losing the I'm losing the phrase, what it's called. Not the accommodating resistance, but when you just repetition work, I don't know. But there's that. And then also, what was the other thing I was going to say? I'm losing my mind. Oh yeah. Like I've also seen like basic barbell type training work during fat loss if it's like set progression. So for example, we talk about increasing weights or reps for progressive overload, and we rarely talk about adding sets. But there are some, modulating programs where you start like 3 sets, then 4, then 5, then 6, and you actually end up being able to push that volume during fat loss while you're not really able to get stronger. But as a result, you're getting the stimulus. And if you're in this like sweet spot deficit for recomp, you might get it under those scenarios as well.
Yeah. Yep. No, 100%, man. No, that's, and like you said, the population you talk about, like that's the perfect scenario where it's like, they're like, well, do I need to gain muscle? I don't want to gain weight right now because I want to lose, but it's like, you're in literally the higher your body fat is, like you said, the higher the likelihood is of a recomp, because that's like stored energy. And on the flip side, real quick, I want to hit on this too. On the flip side, I think the other, where I see this also kind of get, where this kind of thought process of like, oh, hey, you have to be in a surplus, or hey, you have to be in these kind of things, and not kind of diving a layer deeper. When it comes to a surplus, where I see this kind of misapplied is somebody like you said there that, maybe is like, say, 15, 20% or higher in body fat, for women, 25, 30% or higher. And they feel like they can't build muscle. Like they're like, well, I'm not going to go into a building phase, or I got to do fat loss until I drop all this weight then they go into it and they try to get in a surplus. They think that they need a surplus. Well, now they start to gain a little bit more body fat than they need. And then it's like, well, these phases don't work, right? I didn't see any of but it's because you went into a surplus when you probably had some wiggle room here to be at maintenance, or like in a small deficit or in deficit before going into that. So it's kind of like the flip side of that there with that. So
yeah, no, I think we covered it. It's possible for a lot of people. And you just have to make the trade-offs that you want to make. If you want all out muscle, probably don't want to be, dicking around in these like subtle phases. Just go after one direction or another. That's my opinion.
At some point, yeah.
No, but then there's the lifestyle and the psychology. It all comes into play. And it's like, if it's a woman who's 45, she's not happy with her body. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell her to sit around and like continue to add weight or gain fat. Let's just, make that little bit of a trade-off so we get you some quick wins like we talked about before. But then long-term, I'll get you more convinced into like building muscle.
Yep. I like your, that's actually a great way to put it. Dicking around. That's honestly, I need to start using that a little bit more.
Is that like an old guy term? I don't know, man.
I just never thought about saying it that way before, where like, if you're, trying to lose body fat, build muscle at the same time for too long, that's basically what you're doing. You're just kind of dicking around at that point. So I love that. I need to start using that more.
Oh man. All right. So speaking of old guys, actually, I think you're asking me this one. I'll pull up the caption here.
Yep. Heavier weight or more reps for an older guy looking to build a base for longevity.
For longevity. Yeah. We're the longevity experts here, right? Now,
yep.
The answer is yes. No, the answer is yes. Yep. Train and you're good. So interestingly, I just recorded an episode for over 50 guys, and it was in response to a follower who said, hey, you should cover this stuff. And I had just recently listened to an episode of RP, right, with Dr. Israel, and he was talking about old guys as well. And My thoughts on this are like, if you're asking the question, maybe you already have a little bit of experience training and you're just trying to kind of optimize your programming. I think the power building style, like you mentioned before, something like where you have the big lifts, you have something that's focused on function and strength, like specifically strength, which tends to be down in the heavier rep range, is super, super helpful for older folks. And sometimes people are, it's counterintuitive. Like older folks say, well, no, my connective tissue, my joints, my knees, blah, 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 that's too heavy. It's bad for recovery. I disagree. Like, I think compound lifts are what you want when you're older. I've seen older folks who never lifted before in their 50s, 60s, 70s have tremendous improvement in their health and function. And guess what we need for longevity? We need to be able to like get off the toilet, but also be able to move our body around, avoid, breaking bones when we fall. Falling's like the leading cause of death besides heart disease, at that age. All the things associated with metabolic disease are also tied to muscle and strength. So like, yes, in other words, like I think you should have a little of both. I think you should lift heavy, and I think you should also have fun with it and work on building muscle where it makes sense. And the principle of it for older individuals is the recovery aspect, right? Like you probably need to ease into it a little bit when you get started. You probably need more recovery time. You may need to stretch some parts of your body that are like, those are the wonky parts, like guys, our shoulders, or low back. And then don't be stupid because you only have so much time, not till you die, but you only have so much time. Your body takes longer to recover. So like you don't want to get injured and then now spend months and months trying to come back from it, always be behind. So I feel really strongly about it because I have parents and I have in-laws and people that are older, and we got to stop making excuses. And I want to see this generation, my generation, become like the first generation that ages well, like ages into their 80s and 90s that don't look like old people. We don't think of old people as like frail, bent over, weak, right? We are strong. We're independent. We're able to help other people. We're not like, mooching off of healthcare, right? All that stuff. And I think that's the way to do it. So I know I became very philosophical, Jeff, because I'm like passionate about it, but the answer is yes, both.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you took it. I'm glad you took it from that standpoint because I'm going to take it from a little bit different. But I think you bring up great points, right? The recovery aspect of it, a little bit slower at that point. And no, I think I like that you came at it from that angle and I think this is a cool thing about us doing this is we kind of both come at it from different. So like basically my answer to you though, or what your answer is my short answer is yeah. I mean, like why would you need to choose one or the other? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of my thought. But I want. Again, as with most questions, I always kind of want to go a layer deeper. So I think it does. I did say it depends on your goal. He said longevity. So, but I would want to like, what does that kind of look like? Again, is it straight? So again, I think both is there with that. But also this is where I think people maybe miss out on some of this is what's your preference? Like, what do you enjoy doing? Because at the end of the day, like you and I could sit here and we can talk about, well, hey, if you do this perfect combination of higher, lower, that's going to be great. But also like, you just doing something is going to be better as you age as well too, right? So like, what is your preference too? And again, a lot of people I don't think they aren't as up to date on the research as we are with us, and we know that there can be a nice little range here that you can work with. So I think really preference is a big one, right? Like, what's going to keep you staying consistent? And I think when it comes to strength, hypertrophy, I feel like people ask these really nerdy questions, which I think are great, and it's fun to dive into it. But really, what is going to keep you doing these things over extended periods of time? And if you bias a little bit more towards heavier weight and that feels good, you can recover, you're seeing the results you want, maybe you bias a little bit more to that. If you are somebody you like more reps, that feels better for you, you can recover from it, you're seeing the results you want to see, well, then maybe you bias a little bit more of that there with that. But from there, I also, again, I think this question needs to come at, like, we need to look at a few more things. So exercise selection, what does that look like for you? You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing some lateral raises or bicep curls, well, for you, I'm probably going to say, hey, you probably want to go maybe a little bit higher reps. If you're doing back squats, maybe you're going to go a little bit lower reps versus doing, 15 reps there with that. So I think exercise selection is key. What exercises are we specifically looking at here?
I want to ask you about that. What about including exercises at all? Like, what if this is the kind of person, because I've seen them where it's like they just want to do the isolation stuff. What are your thoughts on that? Like, should you have compound lifts, or is this like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I'm pigeonholing you, man.
No, you're good. You're good. No, you're good. I love this. I mean, I think preference, again, it's going to come down to preference, right? Because I think you still doing more isolation stuff is going to be better than you feeling like you have to, like you said, kind of pigeonhole or put yourself into a box with it. So, but I also feel like this comes down again to like, what do you consider compound, right? Are we saying do you need to do like barbell stuff? Are you counting leg press as a compound? You know what I mean? Like,
sure, multi-joint movements. Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah, what does that kind of look like? Because I think sometimes that can get lumped into that's more isolation. I would like to have, if it was up to me, again, I would like to have somebody incorporate some, things, leg press, squats, those bigger lifts. Like, I think that's a good base. But again, if it doesn't feel good for somebody and they're more likely to want to stick to more isolation type stuff, leg extension, leg curl, like what would be a good isolated, I guess a lunge, maybe, I don't know. And they like doing that, and that's going to keep them going with it, then that's the route, we're going to go. But I would like to have a nice little blend if it was ultimately up to me, there with that. Did that answer your question there on that?
Oh, yeah. No, I just put it out there because it depends on the context always, right? Like you said, if the alternative is not doing anything, and maybe for someone who's an older population today, that is the default, right? Then obviously we want to take them from there to there to there. The other way we could approach the question is like, oh, this person already trains. Now they want the best out of it for longevity. What would that be,
Yeah. Yep. And I think a good blend for sure. But this also comes down to like, for example, I think it goes too far on the other end where people try to, like you said, pigeonhole them into like doing like, say, back squats or something, right? Where they think they need to do these like compound barbell type lifts. And it's like, we have some flexibility there, right? So, again, I think we could go too far on the other end. But another big thing here with this too is your execution and technique. I mean, what does that look like? And I think that's going to be big. Like, we need to make sure that's in a good spot before being like, what rep range do I need to work in, or what's better for me? Like, I think your execution and technique is super important in that process as well. So I think really we need to come at it from like, stop looking at it from an either or. I think both can work. What's your preference? What's your exercise selection? What do you like? What's your execution and technique? And then from there, what are your results? And are you happy with them? Are you not? And then from there, we evaluate and see, can we make some changes to that? But yeah, kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I guess the other approach for longevity, because he also didn't, longevity could be I want to live a long life, but it could also be you can keep lifting for a long time, right? That's exactly, and that's where the recovery. And I know from personal experience and guys all the time who just my shoulder's a little sore, but I kept pushing and bam, the rotator cuff surgery or whatever. And now you're knocked out for 6 months to a year. So always keep those in mind of overall health, overall function. And even when you're doing isolation work, you can overdo it if you're like constantly training to absolute failure and your volume is just tremendously high and then you don't sleep. Like all of these compound. Plus diet. We don't even have to get into nutrition because he didn't ask about it, but of course it supports all of this.
Well, and then in that specific example, this is where again your execution and technique comes in too, right? If you're, the more you do that with poor technique, the more that's gonna, so again, that's why I think it's important. And I don't know about you, but generally I feel like when we go to these heavier weights, that's where you will start to see, especially for men, right? You start to see the ego take over a little bit. And that's where you do see execution and technique suffer a little bit. So you do want to be careful there with that. That would be one kind of final thing with that. So,
and one final thing, because we all have to get the last word.
Keep going. Yep.
Because you mentioned men, and I'm thinking women, a lot of women that I've gotten as clients, right? They tend to be doing the higher rep stuff anyway. And then they've said that they don't like going to the gym or it's too much work or whatever. There's kind of a psychology to reps where everybody has a different sweet spot, right? And you could be working 20 rep range for everything. And that could just be torture, like psychological torture for somebody. And all of a sudden, you get somebody squatting or RDL or whatever down in the 5 rep range or 6 rep range. And it's way lower than they've ever gone. And they're like, this is amazing. I only have to, each set is short. I get all this rest time. There's a big psychological aspect to it as well that factors into sustainability and longevity too.
This brings up one more thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
What you have been doing, I think also should play a role in this, right? I didn't even think of that, right? Like if you have found yourself to maybe bias one or the other, maybe you need to get a little bit more of the other one in there, right? So sorry, I had to get the final word. Do you have the final word?
No, that's okay. It. I'm going to go to the next question.
All right.
I think we answered it. This is a fun little one about tracking in fat loss. So fat loss specifically, although I don't think it matters. Does counting veggies affect the macros, and should I log them?
Yeah. So 100%. I mean, it's calories, right? Veggies are going to be calories, so it will impact the macros, right? But I want to there's a lot of things that we can kind of uncover here with this. So my thoughts on this, like I'll have a lot of clients that, whether maybe they're newer or again, maybe they're in a different phase where on their check-in form, they'll be like, well, hey, I'm having some, my nutrition adherence was a 3. I'm having a lot of like either meals out, or hey, I had some like bites and licks and stuff like that. Well, my thought on this always is like, well, where are your results at? If things are trending in the right direction and, I look at your food log and you're eating relatively well, and maybe you're having some bites and licks or some tasty stuff from time to time, and things are trending down in the right direction, it's like, let's keep going. Like, you're seeing the results you want. So why change it? So my thought on this is like, if you're somebody that hasn't been tracking them, you're seeing things head in the right direction, you don't necessarily have to do it, right? Like, if you're really looking into your micronutrients and stuff like that, like, maybe like obviously veggies are going to be high on that. So maybe you do want to look at that, right? So that's kind of my thoughts on that. But then also within that, I feel like it depends too on, look at it from this standpoint where like veggies are they're very nutrient dense. They don't have a lot of calories. So it's like, they're going to count, but it's really hard to get a lot of calories in from veggies, right? So if you're like at a fat loss plateau and you're relatively early in the process, it's probably not because of your veggies, right? There's probably other things going on there with that. Whereas like something like, let's just take peanut butter. I'm not in any calorie dense food, right? Chips, let's take chips. It's like, yeah, if you're off by a serving size or you're skipping out on those, like that's going to start to add up more because it's a lot more calorie dense, and that's a lot of calories that you could potentially be like overlooking in that process. So just understand that, like, I guess my point there was, again, if things are heading in the right direction, you feel good, you don't necessarily have to count them. If you are starting to maybe get plateaued, definitely look at like your other tracking, make sure you're tracking all your calorie dense stuff. But, adding in your veggies can be, again, they're going to count towards your macros. So again, if you aren't seeing the weight loss that you want to see, you might want to look at logging them and going from there. So kind of my answer there on that, and kind of how I would go about that with clients.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big practicality aspect to this, like you said. Like, even if people are not tracking everything, but they're getting the result, maybe what they're doing is working for them. I know when I eat every night and I track my food, it's like the veggie ends up being the last thing, and it hardly makes a dent in the the calories and macros. So you're like, I like to track it because of the micros as well. So if you happen to be tracking your micronutrients, it's nice to have those in there. And then also it depends on how we're defining vegetables. Are we including like potatoes and corn and like actually high energy, starchy type vegetables? Then yeah, you should probably log those. And then for everything else, like greens, non-starchy stuff, my approach is like, let's say you're having a salad and it has 20 ingredients, pick the 3 or 4 that are calorie containing, log those, and you're good. Now, if you don't log them at all, and it's kind of inconsistent, the accuracy goes up and down. It tends to be kind of in the wash at the end of the day anyway, because all you care about is like, what's the change relative to my intake? It's kind of like supplements. Like, I don't track my fish oil, even though it has 40 calories,
40, yeah,
because I take it every day, So yeah, practicality versus accuracy and precision. If you find that you can't track it all because you're obsessing over getting the Swiss chard logged, just maybe don't log that. That's it.
Well, people will be like, well, maybe my serving size is off with them. And it's like, it's going to be really hard to get your veggie macros off, right, from a logging standpoint, because it really is hard to get a ton of calories. And what you do need to be making sure your serving sizes are right on the more calorie dense. But like you said, again, I think it comes back to the practicality of it, right? I would hate for somebody to stress out about tracking their macros and not do it because they're like, they don't want to count every veggie, because then it's like, all right, we probably can get away. The only thing I'll say on this is, if you do have a coach though, because this is something I see, is it might not be a bad idea to put them in, because like I'll do this where I'll be like going through food logs and I'm like, hey, you need to get some more veggie in. And they're like, well, that would be like,
or fiber actually is another one. Yeah.
Fiber. No, that's a good point you bring up, right? It will, you may show lower fiber. So, again, I think it still comes back to what we said, where it's like, if you're, what you're doing is working, and why make it more complicated there? Now, again, maybe at some point you will have to do that, but just kind of depends on your results. So
I had a client who was showing like 7 grams of fiber a day. Like, we got to get that up. And they said, well, I'm taking 20 something grams of psyllium husk. I'm like, okay, so that's why I don't see it in there, but also maybe that's not how we want to get your fiber.
Not the only way.
Not the only way, right? So yeah, all good practical stuff, man. I think we covered, training, nutrition, fat loss, all this fun stuff. Any last words? I think we had a good one.
Yeah, no other additions to what we were talking about. I know, it was great. A ton of, like you said, a nice kind of blend of training and nutrition questions, and I think kind of all over the, again, like demographic as well too, right? Menopause and everything in between. So yeah, I guess, as far as what else, definitely make sure if you are a subscriber of my podcast, make sure you go follow Wits and Weights. I think you're doing what? Are you doing like 3 episodes or a week now?
It's 5. It's 5.
5. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have like a couple like shorter ones too, like built in there and everything.
A couple short ones, a bonus one, and then interview and a solo. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, make sure you check out the Wits and Weights podcast. From my understanding, you're on every major podcast platform that you would be listening on. And make sure you like and subscribe to his podcast as well too there. Again, Philip, man, always fun doing these. There's a couple questions that we had where, you kind of had an interesting kind of thought process behind it. And it kind of made me rethink that. And I think definitely, having you to go over these with, it definitely synergizes it, right? We get a lot more out of it. And like, for example, you asked me to clarify the powerlifting thing, right? Whereas like in my podcast, I would have just not even thought to, would have thought about that. So I think it's super helpful. And definitely give your podcast a listen. It sounds great. Always super professional as well too. So make sure you go give Philip's podcast a listen.
Yeah, man. And likewise, I mean, people like these shows, I think it's partly because of us, I hope, like having our different opinions, and sometimes we're strong about those opinions, but we come to it from a point of like wanting to help as many people as possible, and also understand that we've had a lot of both clients and listeners who like they've listened to a lot of stuff and they've consumed a lot of information, and it's not always the information that they need. It's like how do you apply that? How do you implement that? And we always say it depends, and we always say like experiment and this and that. But keep asking the questions, because at the end of the day, like that's how you learn. And that curiosity is, at least I thrive on that. And I'm sure you do as well. So check out the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. If you're listening to Wits and Weights right now, if you're not following Jeff's show, follow it right now. You've got 3 a week, right?
3. Yep. Q&A, guest, and solo.
Yeah, exactly. So check those out. And look, if you don't like an episode of either of ours, you just have to delete it, but follow it so you get each one. And some of them are going to be a huge hit. You never know. My latest episode, it says, do this in the bedroom, ... See, curiosity. You're like, what is that one about? And I'm sure Jeff has some really cool ones.
I'm like going right now to download that episode right now.
He's like, yeah, I'm not even going to say what it's about. But anyway, go follow the Mind Muscle Connection and stay tuned. Hey, reach out to both of us on our various IG. We'll throw those in the show notes so that you can ask questions. We ask Q&A in our stories as well all the time. So you might see it on the podcast.
Yep. And I would say too, if you do have any like clarifying questions on what we talked about today, I think, for me, Instagram's the best place. Like if you want to ask any follow-ups, and I'm sure same thing with you, Philip, probably the best place to like reach you for like specific questions. And then I plan on doing this again in the next couple months with you. So be on the lookout for questions and our question boxes so we can answer these on here. So
at Jeff Hoehn _
Yes, sir.
At Wits and Weights.
At Wits and Weights. Cool.
Awesome. All right. So stay strong, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Cool. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wits and Weights. If you found value in today's episode and know someone else who's looking to level up their wits or weights, please take a moment to share this episode with them. And make sure to hit the follow button in your podcast platform right now to catch the next episode. Until then, stay strong.